What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the What We Gonna Do podcast. I am your host, AJ. Now, y'all almost didn't get this one. If it wasn't for Dan, calling me out, you know what I mean? Because whenever I'm kind of like working on shit, I kind of go into a hiatus, and y'all probably wouldn't have heard this until Pod Excellence Weekend or something like that. I would have been all the way in Charlotte or whatever, dropping a whole episode. But y'all gonna hear it before the end or whatever. I've been working on some projects, been working on some side stuff. Not really gonna talk about that, but I did have something I came up with. I had a few other ideas that kind of got pushed back, and I'm sure some more stuff will get pushed back. And even today, I am tight on time, but I want to make sure I get y'all something. Shout out to Dan from fucking Black Law and Legal Lies and a few screws loose, the podcast. Hopefully I said that right. And I mean, as y'all can see by the title, this is just something that was on my mind. Are you biased? I know y'all was thinking I was going to talk about some other shit, but no. Are you biased? Me and my wife had a conversation, which I call like an argusation. And that's where this episode comes from. It's like an argument and a conversation, but most of it is like an argument. So it's like an argusation. Whatever you want to, that's what I call it. I don't know. I just made that shit up like literally the other day. I believe most people are biased. I think it's natural. And naturally, some people have more biases than others. And obviously we know, your upbringing, your influences, just all of that shit goes into people being biased. I don't think anyone is without bias. Obviously, when you come out the womb, you don't know. You know what I mean? Everything kind of gets shaped and molded, but even they talk about little things like, okay, babies like touch and they like this, and this is what gets them to stop crying, and this is why they're crying. And this is like, you automatically, of course, those initial things are based off of you living and just existing in this world and no longer having that safety net of the womb. And you like, look, this is when I'm hungry. This is when I'm tired. This is when I got to go poo-poo. This is, whatever the case may be. Yeah, poo-poo. That's what you say when you got kids or whatever. You know what I mean? You talk like a little fucking kid. But babies kind of let you know, but they also respond to you by the things that you give them. You know what I mean? They let you know, like, all right, I feel this way, I feel this way, I feel that way. And even early on as that, I don't know if you would necessarily call those biases, but clearly, they're indicators of, okay, look, I'm not with this, but I am with that. Oh, I think about this already, but I'm not necessarily thinking about that. Now let's get to some more like older, grown type of shit or whatever. Because obviously, when I say it starts from birth, I more so mean like, man, you come into this world and you just look at shit a certain way. You look at your family, you look out. Like, it's hard not to be biased in some way. So I got a quote, and this came to mind just when I was thinking about the show. We are the sum total of our experiences. Those experiences, be they positive or negative, make us the person we are at any given point in our lives. And like a flowing river, those same experiences and those yet to come continue to influence and reshape the person we are and the person we become. None of us are the same as we were yesterday, nor will be tomorrow. That's by B.J. Neblett. Now, you all may have never heard that individual's name, but I'm sure you heard we are the sum total of our experiences. You know what I mean? Because today is based on a collective of information and just, different things and reacting to certain things and whatever throughout your life. So, I mean, I agree with that. We are the sum total of our experiences. And a lot of that comes with bias, because as an adult, I always talk about, and I know people talk about this, but, it's kind of like that whole thing about you can't raise a man. You know what I mean? You can't raise a woman. Like, they're already a woman. That was their mother's job. That was their father's job, their parents, their grandparents, whoever raised them, that was their responsibility to help them and shape them and mold them into the adult that they were going to be. You can't necessarily influence that, and it's going to be hard, especially when a person has been living and acting and receiving information for so long, just because you meet them as an adult does not mean you're going to be able to change them and you're going to be able to break their biases. But I believe that we are all capable, which I think I'm going to talk about that once we get closer to the end or whatever. So BJ Neblett, I couldn't find the context, because I wanted to kind of see, like, is this just a standout quote, or is there context as far as, like, why did he say this? Like, what was around this? What made him even think of this? But the more I looked up BJ Neblett, the more I didn't really learn. He is an author of short stories and poetry, but he's not some great historical philosopher. You know what I mean? He kind of said something that most would probably say is common sense, but he put it into those specific words. I generally try not to be biased and judge people off of like preconceptions, like preconceived notions, or whatever the case may be, based off of what somebody else is saying and not my own personal interaction. And I've talked about this before. I'm always a verify, then trust type of person. There is no automatic verification. There is no automatic trust. You pretty much are at point zero, and then the bar kind of moves left to right, just depending on our interactions and our interchanges. You know what I mean? The funny thing about that is you kind of have to, it's different, you know what I mean? Like when you're dealing with outside people versus like your own family, because your family, you're raised around your family, you know what I mean? And it's hard not to obviously just place certain things on them. And it's hard to get rid of your biases about them. It's like that is given or taken away automatically depending upon your upbringing. You know what I mean? Your bias and how you feel about that person. If you came up and you were in foster care and somebody abused you, you automatically have this. And you're also going to think that about other people that may not have anything to do with your family, but they're going to make you think about your biases. This is how I was treated by men. This is how I was done by this. This is what makes me think this way. This is what makes me act this way. And same thing, vice versa. My mom always did this. A woman always did this. My dad always did. So when you go out into the world, you can have those two different things. It can either be positive or negative. You know what I mean? But it's a given just when you're coming up, whether those individuals are there or not there, and those who are there in those and other individuals' places. But your blinders are automatically enabled. You know what I mean? You can, blocking out the bullshit or blocking out the good shit. You got people obviously that live and they only see bad things or whatever. You got people that live that only see good things. I consider myself to be in the middle, a realist, as I call it, you know what I mean? Because I just accept shit for what it is, and I also believe in what it could be. You know what I mean? My future is not predetermined, I guess. You know what I mean? And if it is, I don't know. You know what I mean? That's not a question for me to answer. That's not a question that I could even begin to think about answering or whatever. I just know what I'm working towards and what I would like to be, and that's the direction that I'm going in. But when it comes to these different biases, it affects our decision making, obviously. You know what I mean? And I mean, it's strong. Y'all see the news, y'all see social media, people, and again, there are so many different levels to this, but I specifically wanted to kind of generalize this when I talk about bias, because often we don't talk about it, we don't acknowledge it, and that's another thing I'm going to talk about a little bit later on, but we just sit there and live in it. Like we will literally be able to call out other people's shit and won't even hold our own selves accountable for our shit. Am I biased in thinking that I know myself better than my wife does? Is that a bias? You know what I mean? Is that a biased belief that I know myself better than my wife does? And when I say, am I biased in thinking that I know myself better than my wife does, that relates to anybody, better than my grandmother, my mother, my sister, my friend. I would sit here and say, man, I know all this stuff about me that nobody else knows. But what's funny is people who are outside of me can see things in me that I can't see in myself. So it's kind of like it's not necessarily a paradox, but it is a conundrum. Like it is a thought like, damn, how well do you really know yourself? You know what I mean? And how well do you take in the information of those individuals who know you best, or who think that they know you best, who help raise you, who help make you into the man or the person that you are today. How well do you really know or can answer that question? But typically, because you live in that body, and this goes to everybody, because you live in that body, because you live that life, because you got to walk in your shoes, you got to get up every day, you got to do all this shit you're going to naturally assume that I know myself best. Throughout my life, I have learned, you know what I mean, that some people do know me as well or even better than I know myself. They think about me in a manner that I don't think about myself, you know? Like people literally, my grandmother, my mother, they've called me and I was just like, wow, like, what made you think of that? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. But in me doing it, I'm not even thinking about it, whatever. You know, we just kind of go through the motions. We just do shit. We don't necessarily think about everything that we do before we do it. Now, that would be good, but that's typically not so natural. You know what I mean? We just kind of react. You can always predict where your arm is going to be and your breathing motion, and if you move your head and this, you know, it's kind of like, okay, the mind and how the mind works, and you're telling your body this and you're telling your body that. And so it's like, okay, I think it, you know, and then I do it or whatever, or do you do it and then you think about it. And of course, some stuff, again, it's just like the chemistry, the makeup of humans, man. Like it's tripped out how fast our things and synapses work. I was talking to my wife and I was just talking to her about the fact that, and I know I'm kind of getting off topic, but y'all know I kind of get off topic from time to time, but I'm going to bring it back. But I was having a conversation with her about the fact that our bodies keep us living when we're asleep. Just think about that. Like literally, this is your subconscious. You know what I mean? You're not awake. You're in this dream world, but you keep breathing. Your heart keeps pumping. And what does that? Because the mind controls the body, right? The mind is, you know what I mean? But you see people that are brain dead and you know, is it the machine that keeps these individuals' bodies functioning? And I know I say that kind of, you know, just throwing it out there, but I know the machines, yes, obviously you can be put on life support. Even if you have no brain function, you can continue to live. But then you do have things where, yes, your body continues to flow and continues to do things even without the brain. So how does all of that shit work? You know what I mean? So you have things that you are conscious, that you are aware of. These are your biases that you know. Yes, I ignite. Yeah, I already know that. Yep, I'm stuck in my ways. You know, people often say stuck in their ways. And then you have things that are more subconscious, things that you don't want to acknowledge that you do or that you are. You know, and often if you're in a relationship, people will call you out on it. People will say something to you about it. When I think about friends and you know, what I mentioned earlier about how well do I know myself compared to those that know me, I also think about those other individuals that we know so well. And we often refuse to hear bad information about those closest to us, even when it's true, because of our biases, because what we believe. They would never do that. They're not capable of that. They're not that type of person. This is something that, again, you built up over time, and automatically you will dismiss certain pieces of information, no matter the validity. You know what I mean? You can have a video, a picture of this or that. And I know some people often wonder, how do these parents get on TV and they talk like they didn't know their child? How do these men get on TV and talk about these women like they didn't know who they were dealing with? I think in general, and I think I said this on the episodes I deal with the homie Sair, you know what I mean? Y'all got to listen to this and, you know, back to the basics. But I kind of talked about, man, I think people know what the fuck they be doing most of the time. I did say we do things subconsciously or unconsciously, but I think most of the time, you know what the fuck you doing. You know what you're getting into. Now, you may not think about it in depth, but you know. Some people might call it blind spotting, you know, or a blind spot bias, which I'm going to break down what a blind spot bias is, because I wonder if some of y'all even have ever looked up biases and know what the differences are. Again, I know we throw out racism. I know we throw out prejudice. I know we throw out sexist, whatever, you know, all of the ist words and all of the, you know, different terms. But what is categorically considered a bias? You know what I mean? You have people in your life who you think would never do anything to hurt you or your kids. And you believe this with all of your heart. You would never think about your mother, your father. You know, there's certain individuals you know them. I know. You know what I mean? This is not even a question, but even you have to question it. I'm not saying you should live this way. I'm not saying you should think this way, but in life, there's a possibility for anything to happen. And like I say, as me and my wife were having our argusation, you know, we were just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I was like, man, this shit is strong. Like what people believe in, what they put their faith in. This is not even talking from a religious standpoint. You can believe, whether it's money, whatever it is, like something you can touch, something you can feel, like believe in it so strong that you would defend it to the end of your days. You got, obviously, you see people out here, what they doing with Bill Cosby, what they're doing with Jussie Smollett, what they're doing with, you know, Juicy Smollett, what they're doing, you know, with these different rappers. And I mean, you have that. I mean, it's so strong. Even when it's in your face, even when somebody's sitting there saying, I've been doing this since the day after they picked us up. You know what I mean? Like, even when people get that, they still like, I don't know if I believe it. You know what I mean? Like, your bias is too strong. I think you gotta be even keeled. You know what I mean? And you gotta check your biases. You gotta go and sit and meditate. Do whatever the fuck you need to do to sit there and say, man, am I doing this? Is there a way I could do this differently? Because it'll mess you up from a job, from this, and it could be from a third person. You know what I mean? There's so many different types of biases, and you have to figure it out for yourself, because at the end of the day, you are the only person that's living your life. So I'm going to go through some common biases. Like I said, this will not be very long. My time is short, but I want to get something out to y'all. And really, this is just like a think piece. This is something I want y'all to think about. Like, am I biased? And what are my biases? And what can I do about them to, you know, to reframe them? Or even when I'm, you know, talking to somebody else and I feel like they have these biases, okay, what's a better way for me to communicate? I see Fresco kind of going through, you know, his whole self-evaluation and thinking about different things, and even hearing him talk about how he's able to handle situations differently because of how he's looking at the people that he's interacting with differently. And I think that's dope, you know, again, because we've built up to a certain point to think a certain way, to act a certain way. And typically we don't like to challenge that. Like, we don't like to challenge ourselves. We would rather some external force challenge us and push us and drive us and motivate us, opposed to us having to literally go do it ourselves. For us to do that self-care, we look out instead of in, and that's the comfort. And again, from birth, you born and you looking out. You know, you born, you're incubated where you need and you rely and all of this stuff. And then when you get out, it's like, oh, I gotta look. At some point, you gotta look at yourself. You can't just continue to look at everybody else and just have this one-sided type of view, this particular view, this specific view. At some point, you gotta look at yourself and say, okay, how can I look at something differently? How can I think about something different? So I got a few here. We're going to start with the conservatism bias, which is a mental process in which people cling to their prior views or forecast at the expense of acknowledging new information. This may make it difficult to process new information. In politics, we hear about conservatives and liberals, but I wonder how many of y'all even know what any of that means. And again, I say that because, again, you hear it in there. It says conservatism bias. You know what I mean? We see new information being presented all the time, whether it's related to criminal justice reform, police reform, political reform, whatever it is. We get presented with new information, but we are stuck on our old views. You know what I mean? You have these conservatives, you know what I mean? They don't want the world to change, even when it comes to transgenders and gays and all these different people that exist, and they should have a right to live and you know, be in this world or whatever. We are still stuck on how it was and what we've been taught and refuse to accept new information. Do you have a conservatism bias? A salience bias is individuals who are more likely to focus on items or information that are more prominent and ignore those that are less so. You know, this specifically made me think about the news. I was like, damn, that's salience. You know what I mean? Because typically when we think about all the different news cycles, whether it's social media or otherwise, we think about the information that's more prominent. Typically, we're not going and doing no deep dive. We're not doing no more research. We're not reading article after article. Even if we click on one article, we're not looking into more clippings. We're not doing any of that. Like, that is a bias in itself, is that we only look at this piece of information because it's more prominent. But then there are all these other things. So it's like with the vaping and that coming, you know, like people are like, dang, why y'all making vaping? Y'all doing all this because of the vaping. But y'all didn't do this because black people were getting killed by police. Y'all didn't do this because transgenders was like, it's so interesting, you know, when things become to a certain level of prominence, you know what I mean? So those little things that kind of get left out of our salience bias, until they become more prominent, they're going to keep getting overlooked. Confirmation bias. We tend to listen to only information that confirms our preconceptions. I call this the I knew it mentality. Once you find something, you grab onto it. You know what I mean? If anything can confirm your belief and your bias and your understanding of information, you are going to grab and hold on. I know that. It's right there in the Bible. But man, look, Steve Harvey said that on his show. Oprah, I knew it. Man, look, it's on the TV right now. Man, I be telling y'all, man, all these murders, man, that's all they be doing out here is murders. You know what I mean? It's this many murders. And I told y'all, and you grab that, even it could be the NFL, it could be other things, but you grab a piece of information and you hold on to it to confirm what you're saying. Now, again, you could be right or you could be wrong. I think the whole thing, when I look at the confirmation bias, is the fact that you only look and seek information that confirms your beliefs. And I think you have to grow outside of that and not just look for that information. As I mentioned earlier, blind spot bias. Failing to recognize your own cognitive biases is a bias itself. Let me say that again. Failing to recognize your own cognitive biases is a bias itself. People can always see shit in others that they can't see in themselves. You know what I mean? You have a blind spot for yourself. You have a blind spot for your sister. We have these blind spot biases that we refuse to recognize. And that's a bias in itself. What's your blind spot bias that you continue to dismiss, that you continue to argue about, that you continue to struggle with? Another one is the halo effect. The halo effect is when one trait of a person or thing is used to make an overall judgment of that person or thing. Now, what y'all think about that? I was like, damn. That's, again, of course it makes me think about relationships. Like, literally, you will take that one thing and you will make it who this person is when you literally only know that one thing. That doesn't just come with, I can't remember the different types of relationships. That doesn't come with just boyfriend, girlfriend type shit. But that also comes when you look at other people. I almost put this into some of the other biases. I kind of do. You know what I mean? Because again, you will take this one trait and you will amplify it and you will pretty much make that more prominent. It's like salience, you know what I mean? But it's a similar thing to where you know how it is, you know. You think this makes a person a bad person. One thing. You think this one thing makes a person a good person or whatever. You know what I mean? And you stick onto that and you judge that person. Like, you judge everything around that. You know because such and such is this way. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. The negativity bias. Humans pay more attention to and give more weight to negative rather than positive experiences or other kinds of information. This bias comes into play when we irrationally weigh the potential for a negative outcome as more important than that of the positive outcome. How many of y'all got a negativity bias? You know what I mean? I know some people out there, Dan, I'm joking, but I'm serious. And it's, and of course, there's all different types of people, but like you have a negativity bias, you know what I mean? And there is a lot of negative, but there's also positive in the world, you know what I mean? I talk about the fact that, you got a pessimist, you got an optimist, and a realist. I consider myself to be a realist, but I'm more of an optimist than a realist disguised as a pessimist. Like, I'm disguised as a pessimist, and I speak as a realist, but deep down, I'm an optimist, you know what I mean? I hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and accept the reality of what is. That's just me. The bandwagon effect. The probability of one person adopting a belief increases based on the number of other people who hold that belief. This doesn't just apply to sports. Anything you can think of, say clothing, social media, you have this bandwagon effect. We talk about this bias, of course, when it comes to sports. Man, you just a LeBron, you just this, you just a bandwagon. You ain't no diehard, you just ain't this, you ain't that. Some people are players fans, some people are team fans. It is what it is or whatever. Who the fuck cares, you know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that it's not a bias. And I also look at this saying you got leaders and you got followers. This is a bias of a follower, you know what I mean? Because other people go with it, you go with it. And again, this could be religion. Again, this not just watching sports, but playing sports. This could be so many different things, and sometimes it could bring out something that is great in you, and sometimes it could be otherwise, you know what I mean? If you see everybody like sports and somehow you find yourself really liking it, and you could make it into something that those other individuals couldn't. I've listened to interviews with Casanova 2 times, and he talks about the fact that I'm living somebody else's dream. I wasn't supposed to be a rapper. This is not my dream. This is not this, you know what I mean? But he took something that different people was doing and whatever he's seen outside of himself, and he's like, okay, I can ride this, I can do this, you know what I mean? And he jumped in. Another one, regional bias is when East Coast dudes will ride with something to the death because it's East Coast, even when new information is presented from another region. Now, other regions have this, but the East Coast is the worst of all the regions. Y'all know about that regional bias? Can't tell them boys nothing, man. They think Loaded Lux did this. They think Jay-Z is this. They think Biggie is this. They think this person is this. They still riding with Tekashi 6ix9ine. Shit. That bias is fucking strong, man. You know what I mean? Cancel this nigga, man. Shit. I'm surprised they got Will Smith about to play Nicky Barnes or whatever, talking about he been tapped. I'm like, yo, why is we still tapped? Well, y'all gotta go get like some other soldiers, man. Y'all can't be getting no people this man. Y'all know what the fuck I'm talking about. I can't be getting no snitches or whatever. Anyway, those are some different type of biases. Of course, I'm joking about the regional bias shit, but that shit is strong. And those who know. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm going to close this because I am running short on time and I've talked enough and hopefully I've confused y'all enough to say, yo, I don't know what the fuck he talking about, but I do kind of want to look some of this shit up. That is the point. That's why I'm here, man. To confuse you motherfuckers enough for you to say yourselves, okay, let me go look up some of this stuff. Let me read, let me research and hell, even if you don't do any of that, maybe you can just be self-reflective and look at yourself. I want to challenge you to challenge your biases. Because you acknowledge your biases, that doesn't mean that you as a human challenge them. You know what I mean? You can sit there and like acknowledge it all day and you can keep doing shit. People talk about toxic behavior and this, that, and the third, and they keep doing this shit. They keep doing this shit or whatever. But I'm going to challenge you to change that. In time, no matter what we've done, if we look at white people a certain way, if people look at black people a certain way, Hispanic, whatever the case may be, over time, as long as you continue to live in this world, you're either going to strengthen that bias or you're going to weaken it. But it can change. Like it's not necessarily so stuck in your ways, so stuck in your thinking. You could be right, as I said earlier, or you could be very much so wrong. And we do have a lot of people in the US that are confused and completely and utterly wrong. But again, I just call it to a question. You do have the scenarios where you already got it in your head that you're wrong. Like there's no way you could be right. And you could be right the whole fucking time, man. You know what I mean? I know sometimes we think the world is crazy or people are crazy and I'm right and they wrong. And people will wear you down to where you start believing that shit about yourself that ain't even true or whatever. And then sometimes you got people who kiss your ass so much that they have you believing that you're right when you're wrong. You know what I mean? Like you again, you could be right, but you're probably wrong or whatever. You got to challenge yourself, and then you'll actually know what that truth is and what your truth is, you know. And that's all I'm asking. I've talked enough, you know what I mean? I wanted to put something out. I wanted to get something out. I got some more stuff in store if I can, you know, get different people kind of locked in and, you know, get different things locked down. But I got some shit coming, man. So y'all just be on the lookout. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Whenever the hell y'all tune in, wherever the hell y'all listen to this, I appreciate all of the reviews. I appreciate all of the follows, man. Until next time, this is AJ. This is the What We Gonna Do podcast. Again, find me on social media at What We Gonna Do Pod. Email me whatwegonado@gmail.com if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. I'm out, y'all. Peace.